Welcome to the Cosmic Prayer this week here on New Thought Media Network. It's Monday, 5 o'clock here in the UK, where I'm streaming here live from the UK as usual. And it's great to be with you wherever you are in the world joining here today. We have an amazing, amazing super guest that's coming on to the Cosmic Prayer. The Cosmic Prayer, of course, is here every single Monday, and I'm inviting on guests that really inspire me in my heart, in my soul, in my mind, to come and share their idea of prayer here on New Thought Media Network. And New Thought Media Network is an amazing, dynamic, focused ministry that holds this space for us to learn and to grow and to understand more deeply how to use these wonderful practices and tools that are inspired by New Thought, by Science of Mind, by Ernest Holmes, by many other teachers. So the Cosmic Prayer, we focus on prayer. We focus on spiritual mind treatment, what that really means and how we can use it more effectively for our lives. So welcome here. And if you'd like to leave your name at any point or any questions, please do leave that in the chat. Fiona is here and Wayne, welcome. Because today we have an incredible guest that's coming on, somebody that I really, really just admire, and I feel so grateful that he has said yes to being here on the Cosmic Prayer. Reverend Mark Gilbert is an ordained New Thought and Science of Mind minister with Centers for Spiritual Living. He's a speaker and he travels speaking as well and sharing his wisdom and his insight. And he appears regularly as a speaker at CSL Denver. And Reverend Mark is really, I think, amazing at the way that he researches as a historian. He loves delving into these New Thought teachers of the past and the present and understanding what their philosophies really were and how their minds worked and how they pieced all of this together. So Reverend Mark is here, and I'm going to bring him on because I'm really excited to start this wonderful conversation about prayer with Reverend Mark Gilbert. Thank you for being here on the Cosmic Prayer today, Reverend Mark.
Well, thank you, Laura. It's a great pleasure to be with you. I enjoyed all those wonderful things you were saying. You're quite kind.
Oh, well, I don't think I'm kind. I think these are the truth. You have really, created an amazing body of work. And I know that you have a blog and a YouTube channel that has been going, since 2010, your Conscious Bridge, a website and blog where you really delve into the teachings in a really specific way. And I'm just really interested on a personal level, Reverend Mark, how prayer has influenced your life. Maybe if you could go back a little to maybe when there was a time when you didn't understand it in the way that you do now and how that's evolved.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny. I was doing a thing on the New Thought Media Network on Saturday morning, and I sort of stream of consciousness launched into this memory of when I was a kid. And I'll just briefly tell the story again, but it was my first experience with answered prayer. And I was a kid, I think in about the second or third grade, and there was a young girl who had been come into the school in the middle of the school year, and I thought she was extremely attractive across the side of the room, and I thought I want to sit next to her so I can get to know her because she was so cute. And so that night I went home, and of course as a kid, that age, I was in that mixture of mythical beliefs, that the four-leaf clovers had magical power, and I grew up in the South in the United States in a very Bible Belt area, and so I was familiar with the fact that the Bible had some sort of power too. So I was pulling four-leaf clovers and throwing them in a Bible, and then looking up in the sky and imagining the old man with the beard, and just asking him to please move that young girl over next to me so that I could meet her. And lo and behold, the next day the teacher rearranged the classroom and I was next to her.
Now, wow.
The postscript of the story was I didn't ask for the courage to speak to her. So the rest of the school year, I just sort of sat there, as a young boy, shy and wishing I had the gumption and overcame my fear. But it pointed out a couple of things to me, that memory. One is the fact that we sort of evolve through viewpoints about how prayer and life works. And
Yes.
so in those days, and for much of my life, there was this sense that you prayed to something outside yourself. And even though my prayer was answered in that time, and I've had many prayers answered throughout my life, those early prayers were in retrospect were spoken into the one mind. And I know that now.
Yes.
And I know that the answer that I was getting to that prayer was really through the shift in my own consciousness and the belief that I could create that expectation and that manifestation, that girl would sit next to me. And I think only in retrospect that I really get that. I think at the time, though, what I was thinking was that there's an old guy in the sky, and he's going to sit and intercede, whenever I ask hard enough on something. But when I got into, but as I became a young adult and I went to college and majored in psychology, part of what I was interested in was the workings and understandings of consciousness and people, and how and why we're here. And so for much of my life, there was sort of like the thought that, well, I know there's no old man in the sky answering prayer, and I know that there's something greater. And what is it? And I think I was on an exploration for much of my life, and I think many people can probably relate to this. I had this spiritual bent that wanted to really learn about the meanings of life and how thought works and what consciousness is and why we're here. But I had another part of me that had to be realistic. I was married and had children, and I had to provide, a house and support, et cetera, et cetera. So I was shifting, as time would allow me to delve into metaphysical truths and understandings, I would pursue them. But for much of my life, it was always, you had to be practical and manifest things in the world. So I would say for much of my life, prayer as I thought about it was sort of like off the table, because I had not encountered the approach that we use in New Thought. And it wasn't probably until I was in my 40s maybe, that it really, or late 30s to early 40s, that I really encountered New Thought and saw that there was a different way to pray, that there was a different understanding about it, that prayer was not about beseeching some external being to intercede in my life, but it was more about a shifting of my own consciousness and the ability of using mental tools to recognize that there's a divine flow moving through me, and then I can catch that flow and create and manifest my life. And since that time, I would have to say I have plenty of evidence of things that I've desired as manifestations, that I have exerted degrees of high prayer and energy and emotion into, and knowing that they were going to come about. I've gotten jobs.
Right.
I've gotten career opportunities. I have gotten, I went through a divorce, and when I started dating, there was this, woman that
It wasn't the girl at school, was it?
Well, actually, without getting too personal here, I was in practitioner training to be a science of mind practitioner, and I had a class that was about 50 people, and there was a and that's when my first wife and I broke up, and I started dating, and I looked around, and there was this woman in the class that had always enthralled me, but so I asked her out, and she said no. And so I went off and dated a little while, and then after we were out of practitioner class, and because we were friends, I called her up again, and she said yes, and we've been together for like 18 years now. So
that's amazing. It's kind of like it is your answered prayer from school days. Yeah. I love that. Sitting
it'll come full circle. and I now have the courage to actually to call up and say, hey, you go
speak. Out. I love it. You see, we could say, oh, maybe that was the 4-leaf clover.
Yeah,
No,
just
I
a very
think there's
delayed
something else
reaction.
going on.
So
Oh,
that,
that's
so,
so
but I've had
great.
plenty of opportunities and not only for myself, but for others to use the power of prayer and to recognize it. And that there is through what the beautiful gift that Ernest Holmes gave us in terms of using an organized approach to prayer with a spiritual mind treatment.
Right.
Throughout the threads of New Thought, I think that you find that, and in reading them, that they all say the same thing in terms of the fact that we are shifting our consciousness and we are tapping into that one mind,
Yeah.
and that. But Holmes organized it in a way that was easy for a left-brain logical person to approach the prayer process. But having said that, I know that when I teach prayer to classes and things like that, I've often said, okay, Holmes has his 5 steps, and I know you've probably covered this many times on your show, and most people watching know them. But there's that. The first step is recognizing the oneness of the universe, and the second is the fact that you're unified with that oneness, and then you get into the third step where you're actually claiming the truth, and then you do a thanksgiving, and then you do a let go and release. Those are the 5 stages. But the key thing, the key power in the prayer, is in the first 2 stages. It's in the stage of recognizing you're dancing in an ocean of divine energy, that because we have to shift our consciousness, because we are mesmerized every day
Yes.
by this outer stuff around us. You and I are on this, this program right now, and we're very aware of what's going on. But if we moved into prayer, we have to also sort of like recognize the external world and all its ways in which it's dancing in front of our senses and demanding attention, that we have to say, okay, that's not the total truth out there. The total truth is there's something, there is a divine dance of cosmic energy, of cosmic consciousness that is moving through us, and that our consciousness is a part of that, and we can tap into that flow and manifest our lives. And so the first 2 stages of the prayer really are a shifting of who we are and our consciousness to tap into that and to anchor into it. If we just simply are rotely going through the words, it doesn't have quite the power. It's when we bring to it an awareness and an emotion that we're tapped into that oneness. And so sometimes if I'm not in the flow, I'll sit there and dance around in my mind and in the wording of the prayer until I feel in the flow, because I know that the feeling of being in the flow is what gives the prayer the power.
And I'm really pleased that you've done, you've said this and broken the prayer down a little, because although yes, people, we have different people watching at different times, and so it's really powerful to hear your own understanding of those 5 stages. And you mentioned that, yes, we're in our own program, we're living in this kind of this matrix, if you like, and then there's this other thing going on where having faith, the unification stage, where it's for me, it's that place of, well, I'm being given this amazing gift here to have faith that this divine is flowing in as and through me.
Mm-hmm.
That takes time sometimes to even get to that place of, okay, I can trust this. I don't have to rely on what I'm seeing. And that, you mentioned before that there's this old man in the sky somewhere, or a woman in the sky somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I agree with it. It sometimes takes time. Sometimes you can get right into that feeling right away. But if you've been in the dance of outward life all day, and you're stressed by it, and you're trying to move from a sense of stress into a sense of peaceful oneness, it's difficult sometimes to do that without taking the time. And sometimes you've got to roll around in those first 2 steps. I like what Fiona put in the comments there too, that it's part of the creative process. That we are constantly, we want to create something in the world of form, but in the world of form, where does it come from? It's always coming from our consciousness. It's coming from the sense that we created first the idea and then allow the idea to flow into manifestation. And so, this is true in my writing. You were mentioning my blog site, and a funny thing was that years ago, I would sit on, a long-time meditator, and I would sit on the meditation cushions and get pissed off because I couldn't get into a sense of oneness and bliss and just sit there and, and have the divine flow through me. because I had all this, stuff coming through my awareness. And so I would have to, I finally had to recognize that the information coming through was part of the divine as well. That I was
Yes.
getting internal messages. It's much like the process of visioning that's taught in Science of Mind, where we're catching the wisdom of the divine. But so not only is this consciousness flowing through us, and we're thinking something to create manifestation of it, but this consciousness is flowing through us, and we can catch wisdom from that flow as well.
Yes.
And so the visioning process really is tapping into that flow through us, where prayer is more us knowing already what we want to put into the flow. And
I'm so pleased you've said this.
but
Because
what I had to
often
do, just to finish the thought, is
Please
that in meditation, when I would have these wonderful fully formed blogs come out in my mind, and I'd be going, go away, I'm meditating. And I had to accept that meditation was both an opportunity to be in the creative flow, like Fiona's talking about when she's painting, and also a time for me to sit and be in contemplation and reflection and be open to whatever. So now I have two experiences in meditation. Some is just feeling in the flow of the oneness and tapping into and recognizing that the material life is not the total life that we live in, that there is a greater and grander oneness behind the scenes. And the other is that when that greater and grander oneness gives me information, to listen to it.
I'm really excited by what you're saying, because this, for me, I've been recently feeling this, that sometimes, and I can sit and aim to meditate, and I'm not meditating, I'm visioning.
Yeah.
And it's that allowing whatever wants to happen, and know that that's okay too, because I'm catching something here. And
took me a long time to figure that one out, Laura.
I don't think I've figured it out. I've just kind of given into it, so surrendered to it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great to sit in that great bubble of peace that Wayne's talking about. It's great to sit in that. It's great to sit in that.
It's great. Let's bring on some people here that are watching. Thank you so much for being here. It's great. We're with Reverend Mark Gilbert, of course, talking about prayer. And Bonnie, good morning. Thank you for being here. Great writing prompts as well. I think that must have been from what you were talking about with your meditations that come out as fully formed blogs.
Yes. And sometimes what I've come to recognize too is that sometimes it doesn't come out fully formed. But sometimes it comes out with the genesis of an idea that sort of like is so in my face in the meditation that I know that once I am in at the keyboard, because that's how I write, is that I will get in the flow. And there's many times I know that I have half an idea. I know that I need to write a blog about whatever, or an article about whatever, or if I'm doing a talk for like a Sunday center, I will have the genesis of the idea. And then I sit at the keyboard and just know that it's in the flow. But if I'm not in the flow, I have to get up and leave it, and come back to it later, because I can recognize it. Yeah, when you're pushing the river, when you're trying to force it, and it's not what you want to create.
Yeah, then we create that resistance to what wants to come through. And Wayne is, yes, God bless light-hearted souls. Oh, God bless you too, Wayne. It's great to be here with you. And Fiona, welcome into the Cosmic Prayer. The recognition and unification steps of prayer are the same first two steps I consciously use before the creative process of painting. Yes, beautiful. As in my class with Dr. Tom Sanner, who talks about the absolute treatment.
Yes.
Thomas Trowell's absolute treatment, which I know the name maybe is a little bit, okay, do we really call it an absolute treatment? Because everything really is absolute. But I practiced that for quite a while, actually. A couple of years ago, my mentor suggested to me just focusing on those two stages and not even wanting to move into the recognition, just letting it go with love. And for me, that was really powerful. To do that as a practice.
Yeah, I think Holmes had actually two types too. When you read his writings, he probably borrowed this a little bit from Troward as well. But he has the realization method and the argumentation
Yeah.
method. And what we know as the step process is what he called the argumentative method. We're arguing with ourselves to convince ourselves that there is a
Yes.
divine flow and that we're in it and we can tap into it. And the whole process, 5 steps are designed for us to argue ourselves into knowing that. Whereas if we live in a state of total unification continuously, then we can immediately jump to a recognition stage. It's like if something
Yes.
happens and you're already in the flow,
Yeah.
no need to go through the steps. You're there. You just know the truth and let it be.
And that argument is really a full-on argument. It's
Yes,
a
it is.
question. It's kind of, do I believe it? Why don't I believe it? It's a bit like oh, I've forgotten her name. The truth. Is this the truth? Oh,
Yes.
how can it? Byron Katie. She writes about questioning that. Is this really the truth? Is this really the truth? And getting to that place of knowing this is the truth. How can it be how can it not be?
Yeah, there's so many ways we can do that. I love Byron Katie's work. I love Tom Sanders' work too. You were mentioning
Yeah.
Tom. Tom's a good friend.
Yeah.
I
His
love
work.
him. But the whole thing that any of these methods are, when we question ourselves, it allows us to drill down into something. There was a method that I was one of 3 ministers a few weeks ago that we led a men's retreat up in the Rocky Mountains, and one of the processes that one of the other ministers did, building off what I had done that morning, was he used a question where we had to sit there and go, why, and it was like what it is that we had as our vision for our lives or where we were going next. But the question we had to kept answering was why. And the interesting thing that came out of that was that when you drilled down on it, like if you said, just to give you a quick example, what is it you want to do next?
Yes.
And, with your ministry, when you now become a minister and you're blah, blah, blah. And then you think about that. And then the question, why? And you answer, and then when whatever answer comes up from that, you go, why? And you keep drilling in. And the interesting thing that I found that every person in the room came to it was that they got down to an answer that was beyond words, that we all had something in us that was pushing us forward to what we felt called to do and be in this life. And it was so beyond description that the only thing we could do was define it as coming from the divine, from God, from spirit, that there was some impetus in us that was pushing us that said we had to do that thing. And it's what Ernest Holmes called the divine urge. He said we all have an urge in us that is, we're pushed and pulled by the divine towards our highest expression of ourselves, to be a beneficial presence on the planet, to do good. And we have a special calling and unique talent that we all have. But when we try to answer how we're getting to doing that and whatever it is, when we really ask those questions of why, we can't, it's beyond words.
We can't define. So it's this, for me, that's 2 things that are coming up. Now I'm going to get to Bonnie and Wayne after I've said them. Otherwise I'm going to lose my track here. It's this having an idea and treating, knowing the truth, getting to that place in treatment where it's specific and it's said, or it's, this is the vision for my life and I'm doing it. And then holding that faith, following that why, taking the steps step by step, even if they don't make sense, because there's a process of moving our feet as well, isn't there? So it's not simply it's going to land because I've, the demonstration's going to just kind of happen because I'm not actually participating in that. And it might be that we're led in what seems like a really wonky, upside down, all over the place direction, and yet spirit is working to allow that demonstration to come through in that way. And that, I find that really exciting.
I can say more on that. You want to bring in some of the comments, though? I get that's where you're going.
Yes, absolutely. Let's do that. Let's have Laurie. Hello, welcome to the Cosmic Prayer. Great to be with you. Great conversation. And Bonnie. Hello, Bonnie. Bonnie has her show in a couple of hours, Your Doula for Grief. Bonnie will be here with her guest, talking about that wonderful, opening up this wonderful topic of grief for all of us to learn more from for our lives. Thanks for the explanation around visioning and prayer. Wonderful, Fiona, for sharing about using the first 2 steps of treatment to inspire your painting. Yes, wonderful. And Wayne is creative flow is the opening rule of the cosmos. Deepak Chopra. There we go. Thank you, Wayne.
You know,
yeah.
One of what you're getting at, and why we feel these callings, and why we have this divine urge in us, and why these guys at this retreat couldn't answer why, because it all got it down to some sort of unanswerable reason why we feel compelled to do something. You know, it gets to what I've always felt is, along my spiritual path, when I found that the teachings of New Thought and the power of prayer, it was so it was putting a big puzzle piece in for me about how life worked. But then there's been other puzzle pieces and that put in, and the other one was the whole idea of spiritual evolution. And for me, you know, just as a quick reminder for folks, or maybe an introduction if you never think about it, is that back, you know, before time or outside of time, the divine or God, why are we here? The divine embedded itself into us and allowed us to forget that we were part of the divine. And the evolutionary force and all the laws of physical nature were all embedded at the very beginning by whatever the beginning is, beginning beyond time. And we're all evolving backwards. So there's a process of involution or involving, where the divine involved itself in its creation. And we're all evolving back into realization of our oneness. So we all came from oneness, and we're returning to oneness. And we're on this sort of hero's journey where we're having to wander around in the material life, forgetting that we came from source, and now we're returning to source. So if you keep that picture.
So just to butt in, that's what you mean by evolving backwards.
Yes.
Just
that
so it's
always
clear for people listening.
Teaching symbol with the V.
Yeah,
to me, that's a beautiful reminder that one side was spirit flowing into form, and now we're form flowing back to spirit. But we're evolving in our conscious awareness. And so the power of prayer and the power of New Thought is that it's a further step in that process. But what is ultimately moving us back, and what you were speaking to a moment ago, that I felt as you were speaking to, is that power of what I would call love. Love is really an evolutionary force. You know, we tend to experience it as, oh, you know, I fell in love with my wife, or I love my dog, or I love chocolate, or whatever it is. We use this word to associate our sense of connection to something. And so what love is always doing is love is taking us from feeling separate and feeling connected. So that's what love really is. It's a force and emotion within us that's taking us out of a sense of separation and into a sense of unity with something else. And the mystics knew this. They actually had two ways in which they described love, and it was both agape love and eros love. And eros was the love that was calling us into the sense of connection with something else. So love from our sense of experience in the emotional level, love is often an emotional force that is pushing us to connect with something outside of ourselves and feeling attracted to it and loving it and connected to it. Yet there's a greater sense of love, the agape love, that is coming from the divine and flowing down to us. It's, to me, what Rumi was talking about when he wrote his love poems to the beloved, was he was feeling that sense of agape love that was pulling us out of this sense of separation into a vast oneness, in the sense that we can feel gratitude and love for the very nature that we're in this dance of the physical and the dance of the spiritual, is an agape force. But both agape love from the spirit and the eros love from within are both serving the same purpose. And it's along that upward back arch of evolution back to awareness of our oneness. God's pulling us back through agape, and God is pushing us along through eros.
That's so beautiful. So I love that. That's so beautiful, the way that you're describing that, and that feels so powerful. And as you're saying it, I'm really thinking in my heart, is that why we have to connect with people? We have to work with people. We have to go out and be involved with people, because there we get to experience that love by being of service, by having wonderful uplifting conversations, and being on our own is not the answer.
Well, there's great power in experiencing both. You can be a mystic sitting in a cave somewhere, and not connected to people, and you can be feeling the divine love of the beloved and the agape pull of the divine to pull you back into oneness. But you're only getting half the equation if you don't also have that sense of love for the forms around you and all of the life that you're experiencing. We're getting the gift of this experience. Let's benefit from it. And one of the benefits is to allow that power of love to flow through us and feel a sense of connectedness to everyone and everything else. And if we're only living in the world of form and we deny the world of the agape, we're only getting the other half of the equation. So what's beautiful for us is to tap into both senses of love, and the love for life and all of the beings around us, and the experiences that we're getting, but also the love of the beloved that actually set up the whole system for us to evolve through. And once we get the power of them too, and there's sort of a melding there that allows us to expand the evolutionary force. I think it was Teilhard de Chardin who wrote that once we discover the power of love truly, and that it being an evolutionary force, that we would have discovered fire for the second time. And it's really true. I think it's going to be a real, it's once we can really tap into this power of love of God, Spirit, infinite intelligence, and love of each other, we can have that multiplier effect that is really going to manifest, heaven here on earth.
Yeah. And do you think that we can find this, Reverend Mark, in our spiritual mind treatment, that we can come to this place and this knowing in that act, if you like, of treatment?
Yeah, I think we can come to anything. I think ultimately we can use spiritual mind treatment for anything that is for the greater good. What I loved about Holmes, and I have to paraphrase him here because it was a beautiful quote, because it's, how do we know that anything is truly good and for our and is worth doing? And he basically said, if it brings more life and love and joy and harmony to the world and does no harm to anyone, then we know it's good. And I think that's so true. We can know something is really serving a greater purpose, and at the same time not harming any expressions of the one. If we can recognize those things, see that, because we can all come up with stuff like, well, I want to win the lottery and money and but that has a selfish aspect to it. And there's things that we often want that have a harmful aspect to it. If I'm doing something I want for myself, but it's harming another, then it's probably not for the greatest good. But when we can find anything, and so back to the feeling of love that we're talking about, yes, we can use science of mind treatment or any prayer work to manifest in our lives that in our lives we wish to feel higher and higher levels of love of the beloved, of the divine, to know, to see, and sense at the highest levels of our being that we are living in a world of oneness and peace and harmony and joy, and that this was all orchestrated for the greatest and highest good, and just tap into that agape love of the beloved, and at the same time use the treatment process for, and then knowing that all of the expressions of the one that are around me are part of that oneness, and to be loved and held in the highest esteem and love, and to treat for that, so that we end up treating for our own awareness and consciousness to grow, so that we feel love flowing through us from above and through us to outward to others, and that there's this circular flow of love that is continuously. It's great. It's great to pray for it, and we probably all should, because what's happening is day to day is we're shifting. We're immersed in the world of form, and stuff distracts us, and we get pissed off, and oh, look at this, and look at the income inequality, or global warming, or the war in Ukraine, or all this stuff. And not that there's something, we should be concerned about those and hold the highest for them, and to want to see us move through them. But we can use those as distractions to keep us from getting to the greatest sense, that we can feel like the world is going to hell in a handbasket kind of thing. And if we focus on that, that's what we're going to see. What we got to do is to acknowledge that there are things in the world that are less than what we want, but not dwell on them, and to shift in our awareness to seeing that this entire dance is going on with this flow of loving energy. And yes, there are things in it where people have forgotten, and they're locked in separation and fear and doubt or greed or whatever their motivations currently are. But that we know that ultimately the greatest and highest good and it can occur. And what we can do is take our sphere of influence our little pocket of consciousness and uplift it, because we each have responsibility for our own use of consciousness. And the more we can do that, the more we can uplift the planet and evolve it to returning to oneness and knowing its love for one another.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I mean, I read that, I think, on your blog this week, that you were talking about this in one of the recent blogs that you've just written, about this not dwelling on what we're seeing that we don't like. And that, of course, is not a spiritual bypass. It's not denying that it's happening.
Right.
It's not consciously putting our energy into that, knowing that there is something else going on that we can focus on, that can be the solution for the whole thing right now. And I think it's important also to say that there are many people suffering. There is a lot going on that's causing us to believe that we're separate from each other and that we're not connected. And for me, prayer gives me that deeper opportunity to connect back with the connection, to become more aware of this connection. If nothing else, that's the underlying of why my intention of praying is to become more aware of who I am and who we all are. And I think if we all did that, something could change really dramatically, couldn't it?
Yes. The more people can shift their awareness into the sense that we're even interconnected, is going to grow. And I think the shift is occurring, and I think we need to acknowledge it. So we have to live in that space of going, yes, there are things that are less than what we want happening on the planet. Yes. And hold the highest for that and send it love and light, and do whatever worldly steps are appropriate in my world of influence regarding those things. So to the degree that I've got any influence in the world to do anything, yes, do the worldly appropriate things. But we can go to so far in a tipping point that we immerse ourselves in it and see the world through a lens where everything is crap. And then all we create is more of that in our world. And what we need to do is to acknowledge, hold it lightly, do what's ours to do to make it better, but then also hold the higher vision that we know that we're evolving into. There was I forget the author's name in the moment, but he wrote a book, I think, called The Empathic Universe, or the Empath. Oh, anyway, I'm sorry I even brought it up because I can't think of the name. But the gist of what his book was about was that all the things that were going on in the world that seemed like there's a lot of violence, that actually the world was becoming less violent. And that was his thesis, and he had a lot of documentation to support that. So yes, it's easy to say, look at how things are going poorly, but the arc of like Martin Luther King stated, the arc of justice is ever upward and great towards more justice, and we have to focus on the fact that it is that direction. It's much like the world in a sense. If we charted it, like, are we moving towards love and oneness? It would look much like a stock market chart of ups and downs. But if you step back from it and look at it from the broader standpoint, you'll see that the overall arc is upward. There is less violence and less killing and less negative stuff. And people are richer and more affluent and living. There's less poverty. I mean, go back and look at the things that, the United Nations put in place, Millennium Development Goals back in the year 2000, and then they updated them in 2015 to Sustainable Development Goals. And if you look at their measurements of things like girls getting educated, or people no longer living on, in poverty levels, or living on more than $1 a day, every one of the markers that they had set, because they had set an intention and then acted on those intentions back in the year 2000, they had made progress on almost all those goals, and we're able to set even higher goals, and we're making progress on those. So there are these things in the world that are highly positive that we can look at that show that we are evolving and growing and that we are taking care of each other. Yes, much of our media and much of our news tends to focus on the sensational stuff and throw those shiny little objects in front of us about things that aren't going well. It's like the political debates. They tend to show the skew of the polar opposites on the political spectrum, whereas the vast majority of the people are more pragmatic and see the points of view of everybody and are more in the middle towards what they want. But our media feeds us that we're in this great divide when most people really aren't.
Because there's a lot wanting us to stay in that feeling of separation. Social media. There's an invest in that, isn't there? And I was thinking as you were talking about, more goodness, and we can feel this, and I'm knowing that this is because of New Thought, because of this amazing teaching and principles that more and more people are using in diverse ways. There are so many people doing so many wonderful things for humanity, for the collective right now. People starting up startups and charities and non-profits and all sorts of organizations where people are saying, I've had enough. I want to take action to help, to do something really positive. And I see a definite shift in that in the last 10 years.
Yes, people's hearts are open at a higher and higher level for the planet, for each other, for sentient beings. There is just a sense of growth and care and concern that is expanding and expanding. Evidence of what's in the news, to the contrary, we're really evolving. And I think, it's like you mentioned New Thought again, and, it's easy to say, well, gee, how come New Thought as a movement is not bigger than it is? How come we don't have more CSL centers, et cetera, et cetera? But what I like to point out is that it's not about the organizations, it's about the philosophy embedded in the consciousness of the people.
Yes.
What we really see is that New Thought is growing in consciousness. Most people don't label it New Thought. Most people label it positive thinking. We see it through, the development in psychology, with the whole area of happiness psychology or positive psychology.
Yes.
We see it in the areas of business consultants who teach models that point towards, creating missions and visions that are for the highest good, not only for the organization, but for the planet. We see it in the developmental goals that I mentioned of the United Nations earlier. There are many, many things like that we can point at, where people who are motivated are looking at a sense of the planet being interconnected and that we're all one, and that we have to look out for the oneness of the planet. And there's a great movement of people who recognize the power of thought. And so if you carve out the concepts of New Thought, that everything is one and that consciousness is creative, which are the two essential aspects of the teaching, we see that in more and more of the expressions of consciousness in people around the world. And so New Thought has taken hold, and it's in people, and it's almost a given, for many people these days. They just don't call it New Thought. They call it positive thinking. They call it an interconnected planet.
Or law of attraction, or The Secret, or, all of these books that are here right now, and movies, pop psychology, that's made everything much more available on a holistic level. So it takes out the jargon completely, and people can understand it in the way they need to hear it, which I believe is the power of what has been seeded beforehand, with Ernest Holmes, Emma Curtis Hopkins, Troward, Quimby, all of these people that did such dynamic work to pave the way and lay the foundations.
Yes. Looking at a couple of the comments that have come in, Wayne asked, how can oneness faith spread like a virus of the mind? And the way that is, it starts with each and every one of us, that we all are pockets of consciousness in that one consciousness. And the more of us that are not only thinking this way and seeing the world as interconnected and bringing more love to the planet, the more of us that are doing that in both our thoughts and our words and our deeds, the more that's going to cascade out to other people. It's back to that whole concept that I was first introduced through Stephen Covey of the sphere of influence. That we have a sphere of influence around us, and we can at least control ourselves. Even when we feel the world is pressing in on us, we can always control ourselves. But the more that we do it, and the more that we model good positive behavior, the more our sphere grows. And the more that we can expand our sphere and continuously model behavior of oneness and love and care and concern, the more that's going to spread. And I think that's why it really is spreading, because people see that, and so how do we spread the virus? We do it ourselves individually by the shifting of our own thoughts and in the direction that we want, and modeling it in our actions every day. And the more that we do that, the more it's going to spread. It's like any virus like that. People are going to see that it's really serving. Fiona writes, evidence of this positive consciousness is all the answers for peace the last month or so. Yes, think about all the people, all the things that are going on. Look at the Ukraine for a moment. Who knows what's going to happen ultimately through all of that? But I know that ultimately what I can look at is that there has been this expansion of love and care and concern for the Ukrainians and the people. There's people opening their homes. The borders have been open. The refugees. Yes, there's horrible things going on in the Ukraine, but look at all the people who have opened their awareness to what's going on in the Ukraine
and
praying for peace and acting upon it.
Yes.
That's
and how that. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
There was a lag there. Just how that sense of connection and belonging and reaching out to people in the most amazing ways, people opening their homes and, offering rooms, and it's beautiful how that has been such a demonstration. That is a continued demonstration for what's happening right now. I just would like to go back a little bit to where that point where I'm just taking you back a little while here, Reverend Mark.
Okay, sure.
That point where you then realized that, these teachings, that time when you discovered New Thought and you realized these teachings and you realized that prayer was working for your life. How did you then feel? Because you said that you had a life that was kind of it's like a bit of a house divided. You were, one way in the day, and then the next in the evening, maybe you have a secret meditation or just.
Well,
how did you feel when you fully embodied it and allowed yourself to surrender to these teachings?
That's a good question, and there's a long answer, but I'll try to trim it down. I had a fairly high-level job working for the U.S. government with the Medicare program, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and I had a lot of responsibility and a lot of people who worked for me, and I had been groomed to head up the office that I was in by the person ahead of me. And one of the great things that happened was that I was the second in command of this office that was responsible for Medicare and Medicaid for 10 Western states in the U.S. And I had been working towards the top job. But while I was in the second job, that's when I was going through practitioner training and started ministerial school. And my consciousness was shifting. So there was this part of me that said, I really wanted the top job to honor my career that I was moving towards. And I had another part of me that had a spiritual bent that said I was really moving into the spiritual realm. And I went to this person who was a voice dialogue counselor, and we were working through the sort of like dilemma that I had. I want to complete my world of form success over here, but I'm being drawn to the spiritual realm. And she said, well, it's sort of like turning the dials up and down. You got to honor yourself, but you'll know at the right time and listen to your intuition to when that's the right time to let that one go. And so I used the power of prayer actually brought me into where I thought I wasn't going to get the top job, because I did get it. I ended up getting it. And I had a lot of authority and responsibility and a bully pulpit from a standpoint of a large national program in the U.S. to have an influence towards where directions were going in a number of ways. And so I said, so then the question became, how can I bring my spiritual principles and beliefs into this job in a way? And that's what I did. And that was the dial turning that she had said, you're going to turn, so I was turning up the spiritual nature of who I was and showing up in the world in my current role, until I felt like that role I had served what I needed to do in that role, and I needed to break out of it. And that's when I actually then retired from that role and went full time into being a CSL minister. But But the process, it was a long evolutionary process for me. Once I learned the power of the science of mind, I kept studying it, new thought, and other stuff. I got to say that I didn't stop with this simply new thought. New thought was a big piece for me, but I went off and studied. I would say other things that were very influential was I studied with Don Beck, spiral dynamics. I went through his
Right.
certification training a couple of times and trained
Wonderful.
with him. And then I also trained in integral theory in Ken Wilber. And
Oh,
so those were
really?
also, they were very influential in feeding back to my spirituality because I saw how they fit with new thought, and they reinforced for
Yes.
me the accuracy of new thought. And through that, um, I so I had my spiritual deepening in multiple ways through multiple experiences and multiple learnings. While in my career, I allowed it to feed my career to the point where then my intuition told me it was time to shift careers. And my intuition has since guided me every step of the way. I've been blessed to work in New Thought centers. I've been blessed to work, 10 years for home office for CSL. And my intuition also told me when it was time to step out and do other things as well beyond working there. So, and it continues to guide. It was actually the intuition, me taking time in reflective and in meditation late in 2021 that said revamp your website to be all about roots of new thought. And so a lot of what I'm doing now is going back and reading some of the early new thought writers and teachers and reflecting on what they had to say and how to bring it into my current thinking and to also share it with others through my blog site and classes and so forth.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think it's really inspiring for us to know that even if we're working at something that we don't want to do, or we don't feel it's really fully our purpose and that why we're not, that we can bring the teachings into it. We can bring
Yes.
the teachings into what we're doing. God is in everything. God is in the washing up. So we can bring these teachings in to transform the feeling that we're feeling and the knowing that we know in the moment.
Yes.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah, my wife is a
I
school
want
teacher.
to
She
bring
brings them
in,
into all of her work all the time.
oh, does she work with young children?
Well, currently with kids 18 to 21 years old with special needs. So.
Okay. This is amazing to bring the teachings in her special way, in the way that I'm going to bring up your website, Reverend Mark, because I'd like to show everybody what we have here, Conscious Bridge.
You scroll up probably and you'll get the top of it.
Yes, I'm going to scroll right up so you can see this is the homepage for Reverend Mark's website. And there is a resource library where we can have new thought resources, ancient wisdom, contemporary spiritual connections, and of course your amazing blog with everything on there. And I just want to come down a little bit before we even go into the blog, just to recognize that you have authored 4 books: Be Yourself, Our Spiritual Evolution, Our Spiritual Rights and Responsibilities, and Becoming a Spiritual Change Agent. I love that. These books are all on, you can click here and find them and purchase them. When did you complete your last writing, Reverend Mark?
Probably 2014, I believe. I've been working on a new book, but it keeps evolving. I've got to nail down its exact purpose. But yeah,
Okay.
there was a period of time,
I'm sure
actually, when I was working at a church and with home office, that I was doing a lot. I wrote the books, but now that a lot of the writing has been generated towards the blog site or through the videos on the YouTube channel. So, but I've got another book coming. I know it.
And your blogs here, you have your 2 recent. You've got another book coming out. Book, which I know when you've completed that back here on the Cosmic Prayer, talking about it. And I love that the blog that you have recently written. I love the blog that you've written with Eric Worth, and I listened to his. Can you talk talk a little bit about him just for oh, actually, we're nearly coming to the end, so I won't. But I was just going to ask you what you have discovered about his thoughts on prayer.
Eric Butterworth. Yes. Well, if you go to my website and go to the resource page, you don't have to do it right now, Laura, but there is a page where I link to a bunch of resources by Eric Butterworth. He was a longtime Unity minister who ran the Unity Center in New York City. And he also has been, there are a lot of wonderful audio resources available for free where you can listen to Eric. He's got a number of books that are well known, that were good sellers that you can link to. Most of his books are still purchasable. They're not in the public domain, but many of his audio tapes you can download. He does a wonderful 11-part series on what he calls the antecedents of New Thought, where he goes through all of the sources that he saw referencing and bringing forth New Thought, which is well worth the 11 hours or so that it would take to go through that. But he touches on things that even most folks don't even get into, but ties their connections to New Thought. And I think it's just a beautiful job. Wonderful New Thought minister, but he was not, he was, as many New Thought people are, he was one of those free birds who wasn't so much for organization. He was more about shifting consciousness. That's really who he was. And I really like him.
I like that.
Yep, I love him too. Great guy.
And he wrote Spiritual Economics.
Yeah.
Oh, Reverend Mark, the hour has just gone so swiftly. I could sit here for another hour talking and learning from you and everybody that's here and watching. We have Christine in Kenya, a practitioner and in ministerial
Hello,
education.
Kenya. It was good seeing you a few years ago. Yeah, I was down there in Kenya when they had the first practitioners were.
That's Christine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
And Bonnie,
I was down there.
Yes, as each person awakens to the truth of interconnectedness, it's similar to lights that are being turned on in a building at night. It's one by one until the building's fully lit up. Beautiful.
Yeah, I like that. Beautiful.
Oh, thank you. And that's Wayne saying here, yes, we are stars. We are beautiful. Absolutely, we are. I love the way that you put it, Wayne. It's just so succinct and definitely. Thank you. Wow, Reverend Mark, for anybody that's watching here now, you're still here, and anyone that's seeing this later on, please check out Reverend Mark's website, consciousbridge.com. And no, that's his email address. Sorry, that's your email address.
You can email me too. I love it.
And email to any questions, any ideas, any insights, any anything that's related to this, then there's Reverend Mark's email address. And of course, your website, consciousbridge.com. And as usual on the Cosmic Prayer, we like to end with a prayer. Would you be willing to share a prayer?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Let's go within.
Let's go within.
As each of us shift in our own awareness and our own consciousness into the flow, as we imagine and know and feel and sense that there is only one life, one power, one divine essence, it is moving through each and every one of us, and everything in this universe, all of the world that we sense, and all of the world of the unseen and the unknowable by our senses is all one world. And we are tapping into, in our awareness, that oneness right now, knowing that everything is an interconnected dance and flow, that the consciousness that we experience and within ourselves is a part of that universal dance and flow. And we know with our consciousness, as we think into this flow, we know and recognize that this time together has served each and every one of us, that we have gleaned something, we have learned something that is necessary for us to take that next and perfect and beautiful step for us on our evolutionary path to returning to oneness, to knowing our truth, and to serving our unique and individual gift in this divine dance. So I simply know that this time is good. It is opening our hearts to greater and greater levels of love, and that we are serving each and every one of us in this world through that love flowing through us. And so for all of this and so much more, I just simply give thanks. I give thanks for this time together, for this philosophy, and for knowing the truth of our oneness. Thank you, God. And so it is. Amen.
And so it is. And so it is. Thank you, Reverend Mark, for being here, for sharing, for being so present and generous with your time and your wisdom. And you are welcome back here to the Cosmic Prayer. Any opportunity that you'd like to come back and talk more, it will be such a blessing and a gift. And I would like to highly recommend to you, if you're listening right now, that you could go back onto, at some point, stay on New Thought Media Network now, because there's a program coming up. There's a prayer program coming up, which you won't want to miss. You'll want to stay with that practical prayer program. At some point, though, check out the Saturday lecture, the conversation, Science of Mind conversation series, because Reverend Mark was on last week talking from his idea of the Science of Mind textbook that we're working through this year. So I know, Reverend Mark, that program was amazing. So if you're watching, check that out. And also, New Thought Media Network, as we know and love, is a wonderful focus ministry, bringing programs, interviews, conversations, teachings, meditations, prayer, practices, all sorts of music, wonderful things that are happening here. And we know that our source, God, is our source. And so we practice conscious giving. And we give you the opportunity, of course, to practice that too by donating back into this network. So the website is here, ntmedia.org. You'll find the donate button where you can also practice knowing that absolute truth that God is your source, and you have that faith by tithing and using your wisdom to be the reciprocal process. That's what we're in right now. So thank you again, everyone, for watching, and thank you, Reverend Mark, for shining your light today on the prayer.
Okay.
Till next time.